that was like a big thing that I think like all of his films were trying to like point out, you know, that it's like porn, highly controversial. Women, highly controversial. Hollywood, highly controversial.
Yeah.
And people like get really in their feelings about it. Hi, I'm Kat.
And I'm a star! And we're the Ghouls next door. Talk about spooky stuff.
Gabe is the star.
I'm the star. No, we are the star. We are the XXX star.
It's next door.
Next door, yeah. We're the media literacy show from a horror lens. We explore the real life, historical, and psychological influences behind our cinematic fears, and continuing our Satanic Panic series, we are talking about Maxxxine. Yeah, we're talking about Maxxxine, which doesn't specifically have like an overt satanic panic, but like the 80s was rampant with satanic panic. That's kind of where the birth of it was. And it definitely is an influence of what like is motivating. So like
it's like the backdrop
there's more than one killer, there's more than one plot. There's a lot going on in this film, but the big killer is motivated by this idea of like saving your soul. You're being corrupted by the world around you, which is kind of what we're kind of leading on with this series, is thinking of what is being villainized in this film or in this time period. And spoilers, it's often just like women existing, and then they're villainized because it's like, oh, look at you, why are you doing that? Why are you being happy with yourself and like your sexuality? That's bad.
And that was like a big thing that I think like all of his films were trying to like point out, you know, that it's like porn, highly controversial. Women, highly controversial. Hollywood, highly controversial.
Yeah.
And people like get really in their feelings about it. Like I remember when we were watching Stranger Things, there's like the Dungeons and Dragons Satanic Panic, and like there's all like that ties all together with what was happening.
Music,
in the backdrop.
Video games, Columbine,
and the fact her dad was like a preacher is like a big deal in the Satanic Panic. Scene.
And it clearly influences Maxxxine. So Maxxxine is the final of this trilogy by Ty West. We have covered both of the other films, so you're welcome to check those episodes out to get an input on what those films were like. But the thread in each of them is, you know, how society is putting weight on or censoring or critiquing just ways of life. And these protagonists being like, forget about that. I'm going to live my life. I'm going to live my truth. Which is what I really loved about X. And then Pearl was just like crazy fun, to be honest. And it also was saying things. Like I think sometimes people just kind of write it off as being weird, but it genuinely is a good film. And then Maxxxine kind of continues Maxxine's story from X and now plops her into the 80s. So there's a lot that is going on. There's a lot of suppression, a lot of discomfort with the way that people were moving in the 80s. And so I think there is a lot that, you know, could be covered in the film. And I just think that West tried to do it all. And I was like, well, pick three. And I think we could do a really good job. But we'll definitely talk about, or I'll talk about like film influences. And of course, Kat will get you a glimpse into some of the history and just information that you should know about this time period.
About the world,
Exactly. But let's hop in. Kat, do you have anything else you want to say?
No, you got it, friend.
Great. So Maxxxine is from 2024, brand new. We watched it in theaters. We ran there because I'd really, really loved the other two. And we didn't even intend to cover it. I was like, I'm sure it'll come up, but I just got to see it. And then I was
Yeah.
pretty disappointed. I didn't love it as much as everybody else.
Sad.
But I need more watch is what I've come to the conclusion of. And I need to watch them all together, and I want to have like a watch party. So maybe that's what you do, people. So Maxxxine, like I said, it's from 2024, and it's about in 1980s Hollywood, adult film star and aspiring actress Maxxxine Minks finally gets her big break. But as a mysterious killer stalks the starlets of Hollywood, a trail of blood threatens to reveal her sinister past. And it's directed by Ty West. I will say this idea of killer stalks the starlets of Hollywood is incorrect. He was stalking the sex workers first, and then the starlet. So I was just like, I wasn't reading that. But Maxxxine is the final neon-soaked chapter of Ty West's trilogy, blending genres influenced by their respective decades. And after surviving the events of X, Maxxxine Minks heads to Los Angeles in the 1980s, chasing fame in the adult film industry amid the home video boom, VHS. As she strives for success, the glamour and excess of Hollywood reveal darker dangers, turning her dreams into nightmares. And true to West style, Maxxxine fuses slasher horror with psychological tension, exploring themes of ambition, survival, and the exploitation of fame in 1980s LA. Hollywood. Or Maxxxine, the Hollywood sign. So Maxxxine embraces the gritty, raw aesthetic of video nasties, specifically capturing the essence of 1980s grindhouse cinema. The film's visual style, as captured by cinematographer Elliot Rocket, blends the glitz and grime of Los Angeles, evoking the area's seedy underbelly. You'll see that said a lot. I was like, they're just walking around. Like, that's just the 80s. You know,
they're just in a city.
They're just in a city. Like, it looks like today. I don't know. They got more neon lights, I guess. And we have like LEDs. But this stylistic choice not only pays homage to the video nasties, but also immerses the audience in a world where danger and decadence coexist. So Maxxxine is presented as this strong, confident survivor that we saw in X, but her supposed growth in this film, which is essentially to learn to care about others. In the last one, it was like fighting to survive. Like, I'm going to be a star no matter what. I will not accept what I don't deserve. But this was her growing her heart 3 times the size. And it felt
the Grinch,
it felt unconvincing as her tough exterior did slowly crack while those around her were dying, because it was like people who she was really close to. And that's like the plot that matters, I think, is she's of course rising to stardom, but there's this other layer of her being affected by loss that she wasn't really doing in X. Like, she lost a lot of people, but she just kept going, and she was very like selfishly motivated. In this one, she was like, wait, actually,
I have feelings,
maybe I should care. So, like, I'm growing up. Look at her. And the film explores how nudity also impacts women's careers in 1980s Hollywood, especially in the adult film industry. And it highlights how female performers are expected to use their bodies as commodities, with nudity often seen as essential for fame. And as Maxxxine tries to leave the sex industry, she witnesses women being lured into to secret parties, not sex parties, just secret parties, specifically for their looks, obviously, only to then be punished and murdered for the very traits that once gave them power. And then later, a woman of supposed higher status, an actress, is similarly lured, showing that the danger to women does not exist, like, consider your status. That this actress, who in society's eyes would maybe be a little higher in worth, right, than someone in the sex industry, was the same to this murderer, who was equating like a video nasties actress with sex industry workers. So I was initially really excited for the conclusion of this trilogy, like I said, because I really, really enjoyed all of the other ones. But for me, Maxxxine did fall flat. One of the main critiques was that West juggled too many threads, and it just led to like neglect for pretty much all of them. Like,
whole ass one thing instead of half-ass and many.
Exactly. Yep. Like, you know, say jack of all trades, master of none, but it's all far better than master of one. But too many, trying to master too many.
Yeah.
And while I will cover some of the themes and ideas that stood out, there was too much going on without anything impactful enough that like, I was like, I can't do all of it. So there's a sprinkling of video nasties in there. Like I said, real life serial killer, the Night Stalker is happening in the background. Religious cults, the rise of the VHS tape, like to name a few, but there's even more. the sex industry booming, like there's a lot. So because we, in our other two coverings of this trilogy, I did focus on sex in that time period, and so I do want to do that again. So let's talk about sex, baby. So Ty West films, particularly in this next trilogy, take different approaches to sex, using it as a tool to explore deeper themes of identity, power, and exploitation, while also subverting genre tropes. So there's sex as empowerment and exploitation in X. So in X, it is a 1970s slasher inspired by the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. There's a lot of homages to that. Sex is central to the plot, following a group of adult filmmakers. And West contrasts the character's sense of sexual liberation and empowerment with the voyeuristic and exploitative aspects of the adult film industry. Each one of them is happy with their line of work, right? And except Maxxxine, who's like, I want to do more, but nobody feels bad that that's what they're doing. And the film critiques how society often stigmatizes sexuality while capitalizing on it simultaneously. And this tension culminates in horror, with the elderly Pearl's longing for lost youth and sexual vitality turning into violence, highlighting how age and sexual repression can distort desires. It was just like she wasn't allowed to live her truth. So she was taking it out on everybody else. It was like, my husband sucks, and we're like, sorry, babe. Then there's sexual.
He did help you cover up murders. Like, enabling. I get it.
Like, I'm sorry, I can't do that for you. You didn't have Viagra. You know, like, what do we? There's also then there's sexual repression and madness in Pearl. And so Pearl is more of like this twisted Wizard of Oz tale of a young woman's yearning for freedom and fame as she delves into the darker side of sexual repression. And it's set decades earlier, like a whole Pearl grown into old lady-dom earlier. And it follows Pearl, who was that old lady, now young, trapped on a farm during a pandemic, whose unfulfilled sexual and emotional desires spiral into psychosis. And Pearl's lack of sexual freedom and autonomy, coupled with her dreams of fame, become a source of frustration and violence. And here, sex is more about the absence of it and the damage repression causes, leading to a twisted, eternal struggle. It's also like there's a lot more going on in the film and what's going on with Pearl, but that's the sex parts to it. And then in this final act, we have sex as a path to fame and ambition. And so Maxxxine, the focus shifts to the 1980s adult film industry, where sex is a commodity for achieving stardom. Maxxxine uses her sexuality as a tool for fame, but the backdrop of the home video boom adds layers of commodification and exploitation. And this period highlights the intersection of sex, ambition, and identity, with Maxxxine navigating a world where personal and professional lines blur in pursuit of success. And the film explores how the adult film industry can empower and exploit, right? So her coworkers love what they do, but they also like want more money. They want more fame. And so they were putting themselves into danger that looked like it would be safe because it was in the Hollywood Hills. It was just more danger. So
you perceive wealth and safety. Yeah,
exactly. And it's clearly not. Like, they were not seen as people. Clearly, by the way that they were harmed. Shout out to Halsey. But across these films, West doesn't treat sex as a genre convention, right? Like the way that, especially with Texas Chainsaw Massacre and those types of films, slasher films specifically, you have sex, you're gonna die, right? He subverts that, right? And it's becomes a narrative device to explore broader societal issues, including fame, repression, and the commodification of bodies. And so each film's time period reflects the evolving attitudes towards sex, from the freewheeling 1970s to the exploitative 1980s. And the we don't talk about it 1800s. So next we're going to go into Ya Video Nasty. It's like channeling Raven. Ya Nasty. As with his other films and the exploration of sex in the culture of the time period, Wes also explores the environment of filmmaking during each of these time periods as well. So naturally, Wes pays homage to the video nasty era present in Maxxine's 1985 setting. Given Maxxine's career shift from sex work to acting, it is intentional and natural that she would find herself cast in a video nasty film. Like, that's a very organic move over, because they're like, we recognize skill in a way that like our hoity-toity, film elites wouldn't.
5 celebrities who got their start in horror movies.
Jamie Lee Curtis, John Travolta, Demi Moore, Brooke Shields, and
Maxxxine fucking minx.
And these 1980s exploitation horror films, video nasties, are known for explicit content and graphic violence and led to significant censorship due to their shocking nature. The lack of regulation in the UK had at the time allowed filmmakers to release and advertise these films freely, which then caused the public to have an outcry over their morality and impact. And there became these morality laws and like high censorship. And it also is a whole topic about like queer censorship and just like what is deemed moral. And so it like, I really do wish he leaned more into it. But that's what I was hoping it was. I was like, you put in 1985, you're talking about sex work. Come on. But I will say this, that the film, Maxxxine itself, attempts to be a video nasty too, right? Because the film features head-bursting, neck-slicing action and a palpable sense of dread, reminiscent of the shock value that defined those same video nasties of the time. And this approach aligns with the film's goal to entertain and thrill, even if it means pushing the boundaries of conventional horror. I will say that it does pull back a bit on the video nasties part of it. It could have been more, and he has done more. And the issue is that Maxxxine ambitiously juggles multiple themes, from Maxxine's career transition and personal trauma, whether father and her own religious upbringing, to the homage of the 1980s VHS tapes, video nasties, the gritty portrayal of Hollywood's dark side,
serial killers.
I don't even like, it's dangerous for ladies to be out there. Like, it was you're doing a lot. And so with this multifaceted approach, it does give us a lot to engage with, but it also leads to a fragmented storyline. I often was just fatigued. I was like, what are we doing? It's a lot of long shots of nothing, or people telling me things. And so the film's attempt to balance these diverse elements resulted in a diluted focus, preventing any single theme from being fully explored. And were it not so ambitious, the film could have allowed us stronger moments like Mia Goth's Maxxxine, maybe even allowed Mia Goth to be the actress that we had seen in the prior films, and also given us space in the gritty neon world of 1985.
Yeah, this one was hard because it was like they're trying to make her seem more emotional, but like without. I felt like in Pearl and X, she conveyed much more emotion, especially like in her face and her way of like communicating. She even did it in like her audition, like for the Puritan 2, but then it like never happened again, and it was weird. Like,
they just didn't give it to her.
No, and it was, so that's like where I was like, oh, I just felt like it was missing something. It felt like a little flat in that way.
Yeah, but the moments where they could have done it, they spend more time with other people saying weird things. And
yeah, and it's because they had like a star-studded cast, I guess. Like they're trying to give people screen time or whatever. I don't know.
We don't need it.
We don't need it. So we're going to be talking about, so we're covering Satanic Panic, and we have not talked really at all yet about Satanic Panic specifically. So I'm going to use the bulk of my section to give you like the understanding of the backdrop of what we were seeing in this film, even though it was like kind of behind the scenes. I think the fact we're like in Hollywood looking at like all the protests that are happening in the background, like people are freaking out. Clearly the film is named The Puritan 2, like considering like what we talked about last week with Puritanism and really unpacking that, like it really just leads naturally into like, this was like the second witch hunt was the 1980s. So The Satanic Panic of the 1980s was a widespread moral panic that gripped the United States and other parts of the world, characterized by the fear of satanic ritual abuse and the belief in a vast underground network of satanic cults.
So different from today.
Yeah.
Lizard people.
Yeah. This phenomena was fueled by sensationalist media, religious fervor, and societal anxieties. It all comes from stress. People just want answers, and they're like, fear is the answer, and it's not.
Yeah.
But it led to numerous false accusations, wrongful convictions, and a lasting impact on American culture. So let's unpack the backdrop of Maxxxine. What started the Satanic Panic? Well, that's complex, as the United States and much of Europe has a long history obsessed and fear surrounding Satan. Everyone is scared of Satan. That is America and Europe. Like, it's a big part of our history and our culture. Everything is God themed, even though they say separation of church and state. And they're still pushing that heavy in like today. So America, being a nation largely founded by Puritans, makes the film The Puritan 2 very fitting to the time period. In many ways, Satanic Panic was a callback to the witch hunts that the Puritans enacted in early America, and religious fervor and fear has led humanity to do countless horrendous things. So the radicalization of Christianity is nothing new. And wasn't surprising considering other forms of witch hunts to weed out communism that were taking place like in the 1950s and onward. Like there was a lot of like priming of the American people up until this point. So American citizens were already primed to respond when the match was lit. It became clear to those in charge that religion and fear are fantastic manipulators and motivators. And if you can convince a group of people that something is evil under God, convincing them to enact violence on the government's behalf is somewhat easy. The path
we're
to
seeing
hell,
that literally right now.
Yeah. And the path to hell is paved with good intentions. If you make people think they're like the good guys in their harm, you're more likely to get them on your side, essentially.
Yeah.
So the match that lit everything on fire, apparently, was a book called Michelle Remembers, which I learned about through a CBC.Canada article. And the publication of Michelle Remembers in 1980 was published by psychiatrist Lawrence Pazder and his patient Michelle Smith. And it's often cited as a significant catalyst for the Satanic Panic. The book detailed Michelle's alleged repressed memories of being abused by a satanic cult, which was recovered through controversial therapeutic techniques. And this book played a crucial role in spreading the fear of satanic ritual abuse, and it sparked a global panic about satanic cults, leading to widespread investigations and prosecutions based on the recovered memories of satanic ritual abuse. The book's horrifying allegations and the involvement of the Vatican gave it credibility in the eyes of millions of people around the world. It also led to the promotion of the book by the Catholic Church and the development of an official investigation into Michelle's stories by the Pope, like the literal Pope.
He was like, wait a second.
He literally wrote the foreword for the book. Like I
That's
went
insanity.
into archives and like read a little bit of it, and
Insane.
the foreword for the book is like, the Pope says this seems real, basically. So the book's influence extended how law enforcement, mental health professionals, and social workers who were instructed on how to investigate satanic abuse, they influenced all of that. So, and additionally, copycat cases appeared across North America and spread to the UK, Europe, Australia, New Zealand, and Brazil. So people basically trying to capitalize on the same like momentum that Michelle Remembers got were kind of saying the same things. That's also why you see like so many films around like The Exorcist, and like Hollywood really tried to capitalize off of this as well. Yeah. So the book's impact were later discredited and debunked after it became clear that there was no physical evidence to support Michelle's recollections. She just wrote a good book. And in addition to these books attempting to create credible claims of satanic abuse, the role of media, particularly tabloid media, in spreading and sustaining panic cannot be overstated. Sensationalist reporting on the alleged satanic activities kept the public engaged and fearful. As described in the American Hysteria, How the Satanic Panic Changed American Society in the 1980s by Hal Johnson, they say tabloid media sold because it was outrageous and just truthful enough for people to not want to fact check what they were reading. This type of media coverage not only fueled the panic, but also influenced the content produced by Hollywood as filmmakers and producers sought to capitalize on the public's fear. The political and religious climate of the 1980s only furthered the public's fears, and the 1980s saw a resurgence in Christian fundamentalism and conservative politics in the United States. Influential figures like Jerry Falwell and Ronald Reagan played a role in stoking the fears of Satanism. And the document Patriotic Pandemonium, Examining Moral Panic and Civil Religion in the American Satanic Panic of 1980 to 1994, notes that the Reagan administration approved federal funding for the FBI investigations into several facets of the Satanic Panic, including serial killers, victims' rights, and the rise of pornography. And this political and religious climate created a fertile ground for the panic to take root and spread. So how did this impact society? There are legal and social consequences. So the Satanic Panic led to numerous false accusations and wrongful convictions. High-profile cases such as the McMartin preschool trial became emblematic of the hysteria.
I was going to bring that up. This is going to be like the school.
And in Hal Johnson's paper, the author explores 3 court cases: the McMartin case, the San Antonio Four, and the case of Bernard Baran, to understand how the Satanic Panic affected different regions of the U.S. These cases highlight the devastating impact of the panic on individuals and communities, as well as the role of falsified evidence and societal prejudices in perpetuating the hysteria. There was also as any kind of like Christian fear induced witch hunt would do, there was especially targeting of minority groups. The panic was often used as a pretext to target minority groups, including the LGBTQIA community, as noted in Hal Johnson's paper. The Satanic Panic, as we discovered over the course of this research, was an excuse of conspiracy theorists to target minority groups, something that was still happening today. And this aspect of panic underscores the intersection of moral hysteria and a broader social prejudice and discrimination. How did Satanic Panic impact Hollywood and pop culture? Movies and television specifically really capitalized on this. I looked up all the ones that really added to this. There's a good amount. The fear of satanic cults and ritual abuse found its way into numerous films and TV shows during the 1980s. These media often portrayed exaggerated or sensationalized depictions of satanic rituals, contributing to the hysteria. It was also good fun. You see a bunch of people who are clearly not fully within their right minds, enacting harm that horror is a good critique of society. So you get a lot of films that are playing upon that, but because of that, it's you're playing upon what people fear in society. It's also going to continue that kind of cycle. So this is why Maxxxine focuses on protests of the movies in Hollywood, saying it was indoctrinating children into the ways of Satan. You see all the protesters in the back with their signs. So television shows that stoked the flames of fear. We had a 60 Minutes episode in 1985, a segment on Dungeons & Dragons linked the game to satanic rituals and teenage suicides.
D&D, and it's become popular with children anywhere from grammar school on up. Not so with a lot of adults who think it's been connected to a number of suicides and murders.
A Geraldo Rivera's Devil Worship, Exposing Satan's Underground in 1988, claimed to expose a network of satanic cults in America. And Unsolved Mysteries featured episodes on alleged satanic rituals and cult activities. Movies that did the same, we have The Exorcist, Rosemary's Baby, The Amityville Horror, Mazes and Monsters, The Omen, Poltergeist, Hellraisers, and The Devil's Reign. And documentaries added to this as well. There were documentaries and specials, specifically Satanists, The Devil Mass in 1970. It took a look into the Church of Satan, which is not the church.
It's not Satanic Panic either.
Yeah, it's not. It's not. But it was claiming that that's what it was. The fact that they named themselves that, they were Satan. Paradise Lost, the child murders at Robin Hood Hills in 1996. examined the wrongful conviction of West Memphis 3 based on satanic ritual abuse allegations. So some of them were like,
there's two other documentaries after Paradise Lost that continue the fight, because it's jump started the like armchair sleuths kind of like the first like website that was dedicated to like exonerating these young people, but they like just like decades later were released and have significant like deteriorated like mental qualities because they spent since their youth in prison. So there's like a whole conversation even to be had just about the effects of incarceration. But yeah, it was because they were 3 goth kids. Well, one was like, he was on the spectrum, and then 2 that were, and they were all just goth kids. And these boys were killed. And so they were like, must be them weirdos.
Ugh, that's horrible. Okay. It extends off into the music industry, particularly heavy metal and rock genres, was also heavily scrutinized during the Satanic Panic. Bands and artists were often accused of promoting Satanist or satanic messages through their lyrics and imagery.
Possibly satanic messages on some rock music recording.
The scrutiny was part of a broader cultural movement that sought to find and eliminate perceived threats to societal morality. Like you were saying about like in England, there were a lot of there's a lot of like push for censorship because they didn't like what they were seeing in media and in like teens growing up and just like the world. And there's also a lot of anxiety around like, because we talked about in the previous episodes that we've covered about like how teenagers and kids grew up during this time and like being separated from their parents were much more anxious about like what their kids were doing without them present. So there was a lot of assumptions being made through fear and what TV was telling them and like, etc. The article, The Devil's in the Details, Analysis of Satanic Panic by Travis James Brooks from University of Memphis, highlights how the conspiracies incorporated Christian ideas about literal Satan, which influenced public perception and media portrayal of musicians and their work. So essentially they like played upon the fact that people genuinely believed in Satan because of their religious beliefs and used that to drive fear and hatred. So the Satanic Panic of the 1980s was a complex and multifaceted phenomena that had a profound impact on American society. It was fueled by sensationalist media, religious fervor, and societal anxieties, leading to numerous false accusations, wrongful convictions, and a lasting influence on Hollywood and pop culture. The panic not only reflected but almost amplified the public's fears, leaving a legacy that continues to resonate in contemporary conspiracy theories and cultural narratives, and what led to media like Maxxxine and the original X being created to really bring focus back to that impactful time period that did so much to define the horror genre, but also like media as a whole. And in that way, I think I do appreciate Maxxxine a bit more than I did when I watched it in theaters, just like for the fact it was trying to do that. Yeah. And that's nice. I love when media is trying to say something. That's cool. And then when it makes me think about history and have to learn about something, but sometimes it's like, you're trying to do too much. So even though I did leave me wanting for more, I appreciate the nods it gave to history. And if you want to do some like additional reading, there's a whole article at NPR that goes through how Satanic Panic has returned through QAnon and like the current political landscape that we're in, and like kind of pulling on like how people are being manipulated to hate and fear now. So if you want to read that is going to be in our blog as an additional reading for you.
Yeah. You know, I think just like throughout history, there are always these times and points where they have like essentially rebranded hate and oppression. And they usually slap on a new coat of paint that's just like Satan plus, you know, like since like the witch trials, right? And then you have like the Red Scare. They're like communist, Satan plus, you know, where it's like goth, Satan plus. So I think it's just like, it's such an interesting thing. And that's, again, what really drew me to Ty West's films, and what I would get really excited about was like, one, just the portrayal of sex in such an honest way that didn't feel like, you know, we're being lectured, and it didn't feel gratuitous in the way that like, so often when films are trying to, you know, subvert harmful narratives like that, they end up contributing further. And I never felt like that. Like there was like in X, you know, Brittany Snow is having fun. when you know she's having sex on screen. There's like a natural joy to it, and they're not being killed because they're having sex for money. It's because somebody else wanted to have sex and can't. You know, like that's such a different point, right? And then like Pearl is just like so repressed, and it's not just sexually, right? It's just in addition to
situationally,
the entire like being
socially.
so isolated in a world, right? And so then Maxxxine was just something I was so excited for, because as you can see, you've activated one of my keen interests, you know, where I'm like, let me tell you more about Satanic Panic in the 80s.
I'm sure we'll get to it. We'll get more each episode.
Yeah. And just like, because I think it is really fascinating the way that we can use these fears of like other and just of ways of being and weaponize those into like this whole societal battle. And censorship, like there's like, and that's what like I can see like Ty West deciding like, okay, 1985, and then being like, oh my god, I have to cover all of this, like I can't leave that out. And so I totally understand that. I just wish like you could have left a little bit out, buddy. Like you're not the end all be all, somebody else can cover it. Or like, you know, maybe it was somebody else, maybe it didn't have to be Maxxxine that we saw, because I think her whole tie with her like dad and stuff was, I get why it was there.
It was, but as you said, it was like predictable, and I agree. So like I knew it was going to happen. Like I knew it was her dad. It was the second they showed the intro clip of that. Yeah, like you knew right away.
Like, do you remember? I was like, oh, cool.
So that was like where it was like disappointing, because it was very predictable, and maybe that was like it was supposed to be, and we're just not used to that. But I don't know.
I don't know. I just often feel like you can trust your viewers. Like you don't have to force feed us a lot of things. I will say, like thinking back on the cult in the end and how goofy that is, I do really love that. I think that was super silly, and it was really perfect. Like it is a video nasty aesthetic of being like so over the top, dramatic, like campy. That part was really exciting, and even her like hurting that man with her heel like will live forever in my brain. I wish it didn't, but like those moments were really something to treasure. So I do think like I'd need to watch it again and give it some more time now that I'm sitting it with it, because it does have a lot of things that I really am fascinated by.
And it was just really fun that they made the cult in the film the Christians instead of the Satanists. It was a very fun take.
Yeah. We will continue talking about Satanic Panic, specifically this kind of brand when we do cover Late Night with the Devil. I think we'll have a pretty like natural lean into it, and it'll be another opportunity for me to complain about media not doing it right, but we'll see how it goes. But with that being said, don't get married,
delete your kids,
or you were mean to your kid and so she's run off and she wants to be a star, let her be a star. Protect. Sorry. Okay, bye.